A poor single father unexpectedly falls in love with the billionaire owner of the company he works for. Will this secret affair destroy them both or change their lives forever? Follow the story to the end, like and comment with the city you're watching from so I know how far this story has progressed. The fluorescent lights in the break room buzzed like trapped flies. Ethan Carter stood at the coffee machine, watching it drip with the same resigned patience he'd brought to everything in his life for the past 3 years. 32 years old, perpetually tired, wearing a dress shirt he'd ironed while his daughter ate cereal that morning. This was his existence. Predictable, safe, small. You won't do it. Marcus leaned against the counter, grinning like he'd already won. $20 says you chicken out. Ethan didn't look at him. I'm not asking Scarlett Vaughn to dinner for $20. $50 then. You could offer me $1,000 and I'd still have self-preservation instincts. So you admit you're scared of her. Everyone's scared of her. That's not cowardice, that's common sense. Marcus laughed, loud enough that 2 women from accounting glanced over. Come on, man. Live a little. What's the worst that could happen? Ethan could think of several things. Humiliation, termination. The complete destruction of the quiet, manageable life he'd built since Riley's mom had walked out, leaving him with a 2-year-old and a mortgage he could barely afford. He'd taken this job at Vaughn Industries precisely because it was boring. Data analysis, spreadsheets, the kind of work that didn't follow you home or demand anything beyond competence. The worst that could happen, Ethan said slowly, is she says yes, and I have no idea what to do next. That's not the worst thing. That's the best thing disguised as a problem. Through the break room window, Ethan could see into the main office space. Scarlett Vaughn was crossing the floor, her heels clicking a rhythm that made people straighten in their chairs without realizing they were doing it. She wore black. She always wore black, with the kind of tailoring that cost more than his monthly rent. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing the sharp lines of her face. Beautiful in the way that glaciers were beautiful, remote, untouchable, capable of crushing you if you got too close. She was 30 years old and owned a company worth $300 million. Ethan made $42,000 a year and drove a Honda with a broken air conditioner. Different species, he muttered. What? Nothing. Ethan grabbed his coffee, burned his tongue on the first sip, and headed back to his desk. But Marcus's words stayed with him through the afternoon, burrowing under his skin like a splinter. When had he become this person? So careful, so contained. There'd been a version of Ethan, before Riley, before Sarah left, who would have taken stupid risks just to see what happened. That Ethan had been reckless enough to fall in love with the wrong woman, to believe her when she said she wanted a family, to be blindsided when she decided motherhood wasn't for her after all. This Ethan knew better. This Ethan understood that safety was a currency you purchased with small dreams and modest ambitions. At 4:30, Scarlett Vaughn walked past his desk. She didn't look at him. She never did. None of them existed on her radar except as components in a machine she'd built. Ethan watched her disappear into her office, saw the door close with the soft, expensive click of German engineering. Marcus caught his eye from across the room, made a chicken gesture with his hands. Ethan flipped him off. But at 5:15, when the office was thinning out and the sky outside had gone the color of old bruises, Ethan found himself standing outside Scarlett Vaughn's office. His hand was raised to knock. His heart was doing something acrobatic and uncomfortable in his chest. This was insane. This was professional suicide. This was... The door opened. Scarlett stood there, one hand on the frame, her expression shifting from neutral to faintly annoyed in the space of a breath. Can I help you with something? Her voice was cool, textured like expensive whiskey. Dallas-born, but educated somewhere that had sanded down the accent to almost nothing. Ethan's mouth went dry. Up close, she was even more intimidating, not because of her beauty, but because of the intelligence that burned behind her eyes, assessing and categorizing him in real time. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. I wanted to ask you something. If it's about the Henderson account, I already sent Jenkins the parameters. It's not about work. One eyebrow rose, a movement so slight it might have been imaginary. Then you should probably make an appointment with my assistant. Would you have dinner with me? The words came out in a rush, graceless and desperate. The silence that followed felt like falling. Scarlett's expression didn't change. She studied him the way someone might study an unexpected stain on an otherwise pristine surface, with clinical interest and mild distaste. "Excuse me?" "Dinner," Ethan repeated, because apparently his brain had decided that committing to the mistake was better than backing down. "If you're interested. If not, I completely understand and I'll go home now. Forget I asked." "You work in data analysis?" "Yes." "Third floor, southeast corner." "That's right." "I don't know your name." That shouldn't have stung, but it did. "Ethan. Ethan Carter." She tilted her head, a gesture that reminded him of a predator deciding whether something was worth pursuing or ignoring. "And what made you think this was an appropriate question to ask your employer, Ethan Carter?" "Temporary insanity?" He tried to smile. It felt wrong on his face, like he was wearing someone else's expression. "Look, I'm sorry. This was stupid. Friday," she said. Ethan stopped mid-retreat. "What?" "Friday night, 7 o'clock. But there are conditions." His brain was having trouble processing the fact that she hadn't immediately fired him. "Conditions?" "No one can know. Not your friends, not my staff, no one. If you tell a single person about this, it's over before it starts. And if anyone asks, you'll say it never happened. Do you understand?" Yes, I understand. Give me your phone." He handed it over like a trained dog, watched her type something with quick, precise movements, then give it back. Her number glowed on the screen, labeled simply as S. "I'll text you the address," she said. "Don't be late. And Ethan?" "Yes?" "If this goes badly, you're transferring to the Austin office, non-negotiable." Then she closed the door in his face. Ethan stood in the empty hallway, staring at his phone, wondering what the hell he'd just done. Riley was already asleep when he got home. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had picked her up from after-school care like she did 3 days a week. Ethan paid her under the table as much as he could afford, and she treated his daughter like her own grandchild. It was one of the few things in his life that worked. He found Mrs. Chen in the kitchen, wiping down counters that were already clean. "Long day?" she asked, not looking up. "You could say that." Riley ate her vegetables, most of them. "You're a miracle worker." Mrs. Chen smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of her eyes. She was 70-something, a widow with grown children scattered across the country, and she'd lived in the apartment next door since before Ethan had moved in. "That girl just needs consistency. She's a good kid." "She is," Ethan agreed quietly. After Mrs. Chen left, he checked on Riley. She was sprawled across her bed in a tangle of blankets, her dark hair spread across the pillow. 5 years old, small for her age, with Sarah's features and, he hoped, his temperament. She was the reason he got up every morning, the reason he'd taken a safe job he didn't love, the reason he couldn't afford to screw up. He sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to wake her, and wondered what the hell he'd been thinking, asking Scarlett Vaughn to dinner. The smart thing would be to cancel. Text her right now, apologize, claim a family emergency. She'd probably be relieved. And he could go back to his small, safe life, where the biggest risk was burning dinner or missing a deadline. But when he pulled out his phone, he didn't text her. Instead, he stared at that single letter, S, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. The next 3 days passed in a fog of second-guessing and low-grade panic. Ethan jumped every time his phone buzzed, convinced it would be Scarlett canceling, or worse, HR calling him in for a conversation about appropriate workplace behavior. But Wednesday came and went, Thursday too, and on Friday morning, his phone finally lit up with a message. S. Lucia's, 7 p.m. Dress code is business casual. Don't make me regret this. Ethan read it 17 times, trying to decode the subtext. Was that last line a joke, a warning? Both? Marcus cornered him at lunch. "You've been weird all week. What's going on?" "Nothing." "You're a terrible liar. Is it Riley? Is she okay?" "Riley's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine." Marcus squinted at him. "You look like you're about to throw up." "I might be coming down with something." Or you did something stupid. Marcus's eyes widened. Oh my God, you asked her, didn't you? You actually asked Scarlett Vaughn out. I have no idea what you're talking about. Dude, your face just answered the question. What did she say? Ethan grabbed his sandwich, stood up. I need to get back to work. She said yes. Marcus was grinning like he'd won the lottery. Holy shit, she actually said yes. Keep your voice down. When? Where? Are you taking her somewhere nice? You can't take her to Chili's, man. You'll embarrass yourself. There is no date, Ethan said firmly. You're imagining things. And if you tell anyone about your imaginary scenario, I will personally sabotage your coffee order for the rest of your life. Marcus held up his hands in surrender, but he was still grinning. Fine. Have fun with your imaginary dinner. Ethan spent the rest of the afternoon in a state of controlled terror. At 5 o'clock, he left work early, something he never did. Drove home through rush hour traffic, his hands tight on the wheel. Mrs. Chen was already waiting when he pulled up. Hot date? She asked, taking in his distracted expression. Something like that. Good, you should get out more. You're too young to be this serious all the time. Riley launched herself at him the moment he walked in, wrapping her arms around his legs. Daddy, Mrs. Chen made cookies. Did she save any for me? Maybe one. He scooped her up, pressed a kiss to her forehead. She smelled like sugar and the strawberry shampoo they'd bought on sale last week. Be good tonight, okay? Listen to Mrs. Chen. Are you going somewhere? Just dinner with a friend. What friend? Someone from work. Riley considered this. Is it Marcus? Marcus is funny. It's not Marcus. Oh. She lost interest immediately, wiggling to be put down. Can we have pancakes for breakfast tomorrow? If you eat your vegetables tonight. Deal! She ran off to show Mrs. Chen a drawing she'd made, and Ethan stood in his small living room, surrounded by mismatched furniture and Riley's toys, and tried to remember how to breathe. An hour later, he was standing in front of his closet in a towel, staring at his limited options. Business casual. What the hell did that even mean? He settled on dark jeans, a button-down shirt that wasn't too wrinkled, a blazer he'd worn to exactly 2 weddings, looked at himself in the mirror and saw a man trying too hard to be someone he wasn't. This was a mistake. His phone buzzed. If you're thinking about canceling, don't. I cleared my schedule. And I never clear my schedule. Ethan stared at the message, typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, Ethan, I'll be there. Good. Lucia's was the kind of restaurant that didn't have prices on the menu. Ethan knew this because he'd looked it up on his phone in the parking lot, panic scrolling through reviews that mentioned exceptional wine pairings and a culinary journey. He was going to have to put this on his credit card, the credit card that was supposed to be for emergencies only. Well, this qualified as an emergency. The interior was all low lighting and exposed brick, with tables spaced far enough apart that conversation stayed private. A hostess with perfect posture looked him up and down, her expression suggesting he'd failed some invisible test. Reservation? Her tone implied that people without reservations didn't exist. I'm meeting someone. Scarlett Vaughn? The hostess's entire demeanor shifted. Of course. Right this way. She led him through the restaurant to a corner booth, partially screened by a decorative partition. Scarlett was already there, studying the wine list with the concentration of someone defusing a bomb. She looked different. It took Ethan a moment to figure out why. Her hair was down, falling in dark waves around her shoulders. She'd traded the severe black suit for a deep blue dress, simpler than what she wore to the office, but still clearly expensive. Without the armor of her usual look, she seemed almost... No, not approachable. Never that. But maybe fractionally less intimidating. You're early, she said, not looking up. So are you. I'm always early. It's a power move. She closed the menu, finally meeting his eyes. You clean up better than I expected. Should I be offended by that? Probably. Something flickered across her face. Amusement, maybe. Sit down. You're making the staff nervous. Ethan sat. The booth was intimate in a way that made his pulse spike. Their knees were almost touching under the table. A waiter appeared instantly, as if summoned by telepathy. "Ms. Vaughn, a pleasure to see you again. Marcus." She nodded at the waiter. A different Marcus, Ethan's brain helpfully noted. "We'll start with the 2019 Bordeaux." "Excellent choice." The waiter disappeared. Scarlett folded her hands on the table, studying Ethan with the same intensity she'd probably brought to negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts. "So," she said, "tell me why you really asked me to dinner." "I thought it would be nice." "Try again." Ethan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Honestly, my friend dared me. It was stupid. But then I thought, when's the last time I did something just because I wanted to? Not because it was practical or safe, but because it felt possible. And I felt possible. You felt impossible. That was kind of the point." She smiled then, a real smile, small and sharp and startling. Most people don't admit that. They pretend they were being brave or romantic or some other fiction they've convinced themselves of. I'm not most people. Clearly. Most people wouldn't risk their job security for a dinner reservation. The wine arrived. Scarlett tasted it, approved it, and waited until their glasses were filled before speaking again. "Here's what I want you to understand," she said, her voice low enough that he had to lean in to hear. "I agreed to this because I was curious, not interested, curious. There's a difference. I wanted to see what kind of man walks into his boss's office and asks her out without a safety net. Turns out, you're either very brave or very stupid, and I haven't decided which yet." "Can it be both?" "It usually is." She sipped her wine, her gaze never leaving his face. "But if we're doing this, and I'm still not convinced we should be, then we need rules. Clear ones. No one at work can know. That's not negotiable. If anyone finds out, it ends immediately. I've worked too hard to build what I have to let it be compromised by office gossip." "I understand." "Do you? Because I've seen men say they understand and then get possessive the first time I don't answer a text within 5 minutes. I've seen them get jealous of my work, my time, my success. I don't have patience for that." "I have a 5-year-old daughter," Ethan said quietly. "I understand complicated. I understand that not everything fits into neat boxes. And I understand that some things are worth protecting, even if it means hiding." Something shifted in Scarlett's expression. Not softening, she was too controlled for that, but a slight relaxation like a door being opened an inch. "You have a daughter." "Riley. She's the reason I took the job at Vaughn Industries. Stable income, decent benefits, close enough to her school that I can pick her up if there's an emergency." "And her mother?" "Left when Riley was 2. Decided she wasn't cut out for family life. I haven't heard from her since." Scarlett was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge. "That must have been difficult." "It was, but Riley's worth it. All of it. You're very different from what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone trying to prove something. Someone who saw me as a challenge or a prize or a shortcut to advancement." She paused. "But you're not like that, are you? You asked me to dinner because you actually wanted to have dinner with me. Not with Scarlett Vaughn, billionaire CEO, just me. Is there a difference? Usually? No, most people can't separate the two. I'm not sure I can half the time." She set down her wine glass. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe that's why I said yes. To see if someone could." The waiter returned to take their orders. Ethan let Scarlett choose for both of them, partly because she clearly knew the menu, partly because he had no idea what half the items were. When they were alone again, the conversation shifted, became less like an interrogation and more like an actual exchange. She asked about Riley, what she liked to do, what she was like, whether raising her alone was as hard as it looked. Ethan answered honestly, surprised by how easy it was to talk to her. She listened the way she probably listened in boardrooms, with complete focus, asking follow-up questions that suggested she was actually interested. In return, he asked about her company, expecting corporate talking points. Instead, she told him about the early days, dropping out of business school to start Vaughn Industries in her apartment, maxing out credit cards, living on ramen, and ambition. She'd built an empire from nothing, and the cost had been steep. "No family?" Ethan asked. "Not anymore. My parents died when I was in college, car accident. I was their only child. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was describing the weather. I had to grow up fast after that. No safety net, no backup plan. Just me. That sounds lonely. It was. It is. She caught herself, seemed surprised by the admission. I don't usually talk about this. Why not? Because vulnerability is weakness, and I can't afford to be weak. That's bullshit, Ethan said, before he could stop himself. Her eyes flashed. Excuse me? You heard me. That's bullshit. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's being human. It's how you connect with people, how you build something real instead of just something successful. And how's that working out for you? The question was sharp, designed to cut. You're 32 years old, raising a child alone, barely making ends meet. Where has all that vulnerability gotten you? She regretted it immediately. He could see it in the way her expression tightened, but the words were already out there, hanging between them like smoke. Ethan could have gotten angry, could have thrown his napkin down and walked out. Instead, he leaned back, considered his answer. It's gotten me Riley, he said finally. It's gotten me a life that means something, even if it's small. And yeah, it's hard sometimes. But I'd rather have this, a real connection with my daughter, a real life, than all the money in the world and no one to share it with. Scarlett was very still. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. You're right. I'm sorry. That was cruel. It was honest. I can respect honest. Even when it hurts? Especially then. They sat in silence for a moment, the restaurant humming around them. Then Scarlett reached across the table, her fingers brushing his, just for a second, but long enough to feel deliberate. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. The last time I went on an actual date, I was in college. Everything since has been transactional. Networking dinners, business meetings disguised as social events. I've forgotten how to just be with someone. Then let's figure it out together. That simple? Why not? She laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. You make it sound easy. Maybe it is. Maybe we're the ones making it complicated. Their food arrived, and the conversation drifted into easier territory. They talked about Dallas, about places they'd been, and places they wanted to go. Scarlett had traveled everywhere, Paris, Tokyo, Dubai, but always for work, always scheduled down to the minute. Ethan had barely left Texas, but he told her about the road trip he'd taken with Riley last summer, driving through small towns and stopping at every weird roadside attraction they could find. That sounds nice, she said, and she actually meant it. It was. Riley's at the perfect age for that kind of thing. Everything's an adventure. I envy that. The ability to find wonder in small things. You could do it too. Could I? She smiled, but there was sadness in it. I'm not sure I remember how. By the time dessert arrived, something involving chocolate and gold leaf that probably cost more than Ethan's weekly grocery budget, the tension had melted away. They were just two people, talking. It felt strange and normal all at once. Scarlett insisted on paying. Ethan tried to argue, but she shut him down with a look. I make more in an hour than you do in a month, she said bluntly. This isn't charity, it's logistics. Still feels weird. Get over it. Outside, the Dallas heat had faded into a warm evening. The valet brought Scarlett's car, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than Ethan's annual salary. She stood beside it, keys in hand, not quite ready to leave. Thank you, she said. For tonight, for being unexpected. Same to you. I mean it. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a dinner this much. Ethan took a breath, decided to risk it. Then let's do it again. Ethan, I know, secret, careful, all of that, but within those rules. Can we try this, whatever this is? Scarlett studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, decisive. Text me. We'll figure something out. She got in her car and he watched her drive away, taillights disappearing into the Dallas night. When Ethan got home, Mrs. Chen was asleep on his couch, the TV playing quietly. He paid her, added an extra $20 he couldn't really afford, and thanked her softly. After she left, he checked on Riley, still asleep, still perfect, and then sat in his dark living room trying to process what had just happened. His phone buzzed. S. Made it home. That wasn't terrible. Ethan. High praise. S. Don't push your luck. Ethan. Wouldn't dream of it. S. Liar. He smiled at his phone like an idiot, typing and deleting messages until he settled on something simple. Ethan. Good night, Scarlett. The response took long enough that he thought maybe she'd put her phone down. Then, S. Good night, Ethan. He fell asleep on the couch, his phone still in his hand, and dreamed of dark hair and sharp smiles and the feeling of standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and wonderful. The following Monday, Ethan walked into the office expecting everything to feel different, but the fluorescent lights buzzed the same way. The elevator made the same grinding noise, and Marcus was already at his desk with his third coffee of the morning. Nothing had changed except Ethan himself, and he wasn't sure anyone else could tell. Scarlett arrived at 9:15, striding through the office with her usual untouchable energy. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him, passed his desk without so much as a glance, and Ethan felt the deliberate weight of that non-acknowledgement settle in his chest. This was the rule, the condition. No one could know. It shouldn't have bothered him. He'd agreed to it, but watching her disappear into her office, watching the door close with that expensive click, he felt the gap between their worlds stretch wider. Earth to Carter. Marcus snapped his fingers in front of his face. You alive in there? Yeah, sorry, late night. Riley keep you up? Something like that. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out casually, expecting a reminder about picking up milk or a message from Mrs. Chen. Instead, S. Stop staring. People will notice. Ethan's head snapped up. Through the glass walls of her office, he could just barely make out Scarlett's silhouette. She was facing her computer, but he knew, somehow, that she was watching. Ethan. I wasn't staring. S. You were. It's endearing and dangerous in equal measure. Ethan. Noted. I'll work on my poker face. Please do, or I'll have to fire you just to avoid suspicion. Ethan. That seems extreme. C. Welcome to my world. He pocketed his phone, forced himself to focus on the spreadsheet in front of him. Numbers blurred together. His brain kept replaying Friday night, the way she'd laughed, the way her guard had slipped just enough to let him see the person underneath. The day crawled forward. Ethan sat through a meeting about quarterly projections, nodded in the right places, contributed nothing of substance. Jenkins from accounting droned on about revenue streams while Ethan's phone sat heavy in his pocket, a secret he couldn't share. At lunch, Marcus cornered him again in the break room. Okay, what's going on with you? Nothing's going on. You've checked your phone like 50 times today. You never check your phone. Maybe I'm expecting an important email. From who? Riley's kindergarten teacher? Marcus leaned against the counter, studying him. This is about her, isn't it? Scarlett Vaughn. You actually went through with it. Ethan concentrated on his sandwich. I don't know what you're talking about. Bullshit. You're acting weird. You keep looking at her office, and you have this expression, like you know something no one else knows. You're imagining things. Am I? Because if you did ask her out, and she did say yes, you'd have to hide it. You couldn't tell anyone. You'd have to act normal while secretly losing your mind. Marcus paused. Kind of like how you're acting right now. Ethan set down his sandwich, looked his friend in the eye. Even if, hypothetically, something like that happened, would you want to know? Would you want to carry that around knowing you couldn't say anything? Marcus's grin faded. That's serious? That complicated. Damn. Marcus was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth. You seem different. Lighter, maybe. Like something shifted. So whatever's going on, hypothetically, I hope it's worth it. Me too. That evening, after he'd picked up Riley and suffered through her detailed explanation of the injustice of having to share crayons at school, after he'd made dinner and supervised homework and read 3 picture books, Ethan's phone buzzed. CEO, are you free Thursday night? Ethan, I can be. Why? S. There's a gallery opening, contemporary art, mostly terrible, but it's across town. No one from work will be there, and I'm required to make an appearance. Ethan. Required? S. The artist is my cousin's ex-boyfriend. It's a long story involving guilt and family obligations. Will you come with me? Ethan. To look at terrible art? S. To keep me sane while I look at terrible art. There's a difference. Ethan. What's the dress code? S. Creative black tie. Which means wear whatever, as long as it's expensive. Ethan. I don't own anything expensive. Then wear what you wore to dinner and pretend you're making an ironic statement about capitalism. Ethan. Will that work? S. Probably not, but I'll enjoy watching you try. He smiled at his phone, aware that Riley was watching him with the uncanny perception that 5-year-olds sometimes had. Who's that? She asked, pointing at his screen with a marker-stained finger. Just someone from work. They make you smile funny. I don't smile funny. You do. You look like you did when we got ice cream that one time and they gave you extra sprinkles. Ethan laughed despite himself. Go brush your teeth, troublemaker. Can Mrs. Chen come over Thursday? Probably. Why? Because you're going out again with your work friend who makes you smile funny. She skipped off to the bathroom, leaving Ethan sitting on the couch, marveling at how transparent he apparently was to a kindergartner. Thursday arrived wrapped in humidity and traffic delays. Ethan left work early again, endured Marcus's knowing look, and made it home with barely enough time to shower and change. Mrs. Chen showed up right on schedule, took one look at him, and smiled. 2 dates in 1 week. I'm impressed. It's not. We're just friends. Friends don't make you iron your shirt 3 times. I ironed it once. The scorch mark on the collar suggests otherwise. Ethan looked down, saw the faint discoloration he'd been hoping wasn't noticeable. Damn. Wear the blue one. It brings out your eyes. I don't think anyone's looking at my eyes. Then they're not paying attention. The gallery was in a converted warehouse in the design district, all exposed ductwork and polished concrete floors. Ethan parked 2 blocks away, walked through the gathering dusk, and felt spectacularly out of place the moment he stepped inside. Everyone was dressed in variations of artistic black, draped fabrics and asymmetrical cuts and accessories that probably cost more than his car. He found Scarlett near the back, standing in front of a canvas that appeared to be nothing but red slashes on white background. She wore a black dress that somehow managed to be both simple and devastating, her hair swept up to expose the line of her neck. You came, she said, not looking at him. You doubted? A little. She tilted her head toward the painting. What do you think? Honestly, it looks like someone murdered a canvas. The artist calls it Rage Against the Dying of Capitalism. Does he know capitalism is doing fine? She laughed, quiet and genuine. Don't let him hear you say that. He's very committed to his anti-establishment credentials, despite the fact that each piece costs $15,000. $15,000. Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. I know, it's absurd, but people will buy them because they're told they should. That's how this works. You pay for the story, not the art. They moved through the gallery together, maintaining careful distance. To anyone watching, they were strangers who happened to be viewing the same terrible art, but their conversation flowed in quiet currents, observations and jokes shared in low voices that no one else could hear. That one looks like a toddler got into the paint, Ethan murmured, nodding at a canvas covered in handprints. That's actually called The Touch of Industry. It's a commentary on labor exploitation. Are you serious? Unfortunately. A waiter passed with champagne. Scarlett took 2 glasses, handed one to Ethan. Their fingers brushed, a contact so brief it might have been accidental. This is nice, she said after a moment. Being out. Not hiding completely, but not performing either, just existing in the same space. Is that rare for you? Very. I'm always on, always managing how I'm perceived. Even when I'm alone, I'm still the CEO of Vaughn Industries. There's no off switch. That sounds exhausting. It is. She sipped her champagne, her gaze distant. But it's what I chose, what I built. I can't complain about the weight of something I decided to carry. Sure you can. Just because you chose it doesn't mean it isn't heavy. She looked at him then, really looked at him. And Ethan saw something raw flash across her face. Loneliness, maybe? Or recognition. How do you do that? She asked. Do what? Say things that cut right through to the truth. Most people dance around it. They tell me what they think I want to hear. Maybe I'm just too tired to dance. Or maybe you're braver than you think. Before Ethan could respond, a man appeared beside them, tall, angular, wearing a shirt that was either avant-garde or inside out. The artist, Ethan guessed, confirmed when Scarlett's expression shifted into something polite and distant. Scarlett, I'm so glad you could make it. David, the collection is impressive. I'm exploring the intersection of violence and beauty, the way society consumes both without distinction. Fascinating, Scarlett said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. David's gaze slid to Ethan, assessing and dismissive in the same glance. And you are? Ethan. He didn't offer his hand. Something about the guy's smug expression made him want to be petty. Are you a collector? No, just someone who appreciates art. Oh? And what do you think of my work? Ethan could feel Scarlett's attention sharpen beside him. He should have been diplomatic. Should have offered some generic praise. Instead, he heard himself say, I think it's angry, but I'm not sure what it's angry about. It feels like rage for the sake of rage, without any real target. David's expression froze. That's a rather simplistic reading. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just not getting the story you're trying to sell. The tension stretched between them. Then Scarlett stepped in smoothly, her voice cutting through with practiced ease. David, you'll have to forgive my friend. He's a data analyst. He sees patterns where the rest of us see chaos. She touched David's arm, a gesture of dismissal disguised as affection. We should let you get back to your other guests. I know how demanding these events can be. David left, his expression sour. The moment he was out of earshot, Scarlett turned to Ethan. That was either incredibly stupid or incredibly satisfying. Can it be both? With you, it usually is. She was trying not to smile. He's going to tell everyone that I brought some Philistine who doesn't understand contemporary art. Sorry, I should have kept my mouth shut. Don't be. That was the most honest conversation he's probably had all night. Everyone else is too busy networking to tell him his work is derivative. She paused. Though now we should probably leave before he decides to make a scene. They slipped out through a side exit, stepping into the Dallas heat. The street was quieter here, away from the main entrance. Streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. Thank you for coming, Scarlett said. I know it's not exactly your scene. It's not, but you make it bearable. High praise. I'm full of it tonight. She laughed, and the sound echoed off the warehouse walls. Walk with me? My car's a few blocks away. They fell into step together, the city humming around them. It was late enough that the traffic had thinned, early enough that the bars were still full of voices and music. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that didn't need filling. Can I ask you something? Ethan said eventually. That depends on the question. Why did you really say yes? To dinner, I mean. You could have shut me down immediately. But you didn't. Scarlett was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Because you looked at me like I was a person, not a position, not a prize, just me. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time someone had done that. She stopped walking, turned to face him. I've built this entire life around being untouchable, invulnerable. But you walked into my office and asked me to dinner like it was the most natural thing in the world, like you weren't risking anything, even though we both know you were. I was terrified. I know, I could see it, but you asked anyway. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something dark and expensive. That meant something, it still does. Ethan's heart was doing that acrobatic thing again. They were standing under a streetlight, the gallery entrance visible in the distance, and it would have been so easy to kiss her. The moment was right there, suspended between them, but Scarlett stepped back first. We should be careful, she said, and he could hear the regret in it. Not here, not where someone might see. Right. Of course. They walked the rest of the way to her car in silence, the moment fractured but not broken. When they reached the Mercedes, Scarlett unlocked it but didn't get in. "Text me when you get home," she said. "I will." "And Ethan?" "Yeah? Next time let's skip the terrible art." He watched her drive away, then walk back to his own car, his head full of things he couldn't say and didn't know how to name. The next 2 weeks fell into a pattern. At work, they were strangers. Scarlett remained untouchable, brilliant, terrifying. Ethan kept his head down, did his job, and tried not to stare at her office. But his phone became a lifeline, a secret channel where they could be honest. Meeting with investors ran over. "I want to throw something." Ethan: "Throw what?" Jenkins: "He's breathing too loud." Ethan: "That does sound annoying." "Thank you for validating my completely rational irritation." Ethan: "Any time." They met when they could, always carefully, always in places where no one from Vaughn Industries would be. A quiet coffee shop in Oak Cliff where Scarlett wore sunglasses and no one recognized her. A late movie at an art house theater where they sat in the back row and didn't touch. A bookstore in Deep Ellum where they wandered separate aisles and texted each other recommendations. It was slow and frustrating and strangely perfect. Ethan learned things about her in fragments, that she was left-handed, that she'd wanted to be a pianist before her parents died, that she slept 4 hours a night and considered that generous. Scarlett learned that he'd once dreamed of being a writer, that Riley's favorite food was macaroni with hot dogs cut up in it, that he'd been scared out of his mind the day his daughter was born. "You never talk about her mother," Scarlett said one evening. They were sitting in his car in the parking lot of a grocery store, ostensibly because she needed to pick up something, but really because they'd both needed to see each other, and this was the best they could do. Not much to talk about. "I find that hard to believe." Ethan stared through the windshield at the fluorescent store entrance. Sarah is a free spirit. She hated being tied down. When she got pregnant, she promised she'd try. She really did try. But after Riley was born, something just broke. She couldn't handle it. The crying, the responsibility, the way your entire life stops being about you. "Did you see it coming?" "No. I thought we were building something, a family, but I was wrong." She left a note on the kitchen table and was gone before I woke up. "Wo ipos tatawo." He laughed, bitter and brief. The note said she was sorry, that she hoped I'd understand someday. I crumpled it up and threw it away. Haven't heard from her since. "Do you hate her?" "Sometimes, but mostly I just feel empty when I think about her. Like that whole part of my life happened to someone else." Scarlett reached across the console, took his hand. It was the first time they'd touched in days, and the contact felt electric. "Riley's lucky to have you," she said quietly. "I'm lucky to have her." "That's not the same thing." "No, but it's true anyway." They sat like that for a while, hands linked, watching people push shopping carts through the parking lot. Ordinary people doing ordinary things, unaware that two lives were intersecting in a parked Honda, hidden in plain sight. "I don't know how to do this," Scarlett admitted. "This thing we're doing. I keep waiting for it to feel wrong, or complicated, or like a mistake. But it doesn't. It just feels real?" "Yes, real." She looked at him, and her expression was unguarded in a way that made his chest ache. "That scares me more than anything else." "Why?" "Because real things can hurt you. Real things have consequences. They also have rewards." "Do they? Or is that just something we tell ourselves to justify the risk?" Ethan didn't have an answer for that, so instead, he lifted her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles, and let the gesture speak for him. At work, the careful dance continued. Ethan sat through meetings where Scarlett's voice cut through competing opinions with surgical precision. He watched her dismantle bad ideas and build better ones, watched the way people deferred to her without realizing they were doing it. She was brilliant and ruthless and completely in control. And then his phone would buzz with a message that said, "I'm so tired of being in control. I want to be reckless." Or, "What would happen if I just walked out right now, got in my car and drove until I ran out of road?" Or, "Late one night, are you awake?" Ethan, "Now I am. What's wrong?" See, Nothing. Everything. I don't know. I just wanted to talk to someone who sees me as more than a function. Ethan. You're more than a function. S. Am I? Sometimes I'm not sure. I've been the CEO for so long I've forgotten how to be anything else. Ethan. You're a person who likes terrible art galleries and good wine, who gets frustrated when people breathe too loud, who's scared of being real because real things can hurt. How do you do that? Ethan. Do what? S. Make me feel seen. Ethan. I just pay attention. S. No one else does. Ethan. Then they're missing out. There was a long pause before her next message arrived. S. I want to see you, actually see you, not hidden in a parking lot or a dark theater, somewhere we can just be. Ethan. Where? Please. I don't know. Somewhere far enough away that it doesn't matter who sees us. Ethan. I have Riley this weekend. Sub, next weekend then. I'll clear my schedule. We'll go somewhere, just the two of us. Ethan. Scarlett. I know it's risky. I know it breaks our rules, but I don't care. I need this. I need you. Ethan stared at his phone, at those last 3 words glowing in the darkness of his bedroom. Riley was asleep down the hall. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. He could say no. He could be smart, be careful, protect what little stability he'd built. Instead, he typed, "Okay, where do you want to go?" S. Anywhere, as long as it's with you. He fell asleep that night with his phone on his chest, a smile on his face, and no idea how badly everything was about to unravel. The meeting room on the 4th floor smelled like burnt coffee and anxiety. Ethan sat 3 seats down from the head of the table, his laptop open to a presentation he'd spent 2 weeks preparing. Jenkins was mid-sentence, droning on about market penetration strategies, when Scarlett walked in. The room shifted. Everyone sat up straighter without meaning to, like plants turning toward light. She took her seat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable, and nodded for Jenkins to continue. Ethan had gotten better at not looking at her, at keeping his face neutral, his attention focused on the numbers in front of him, but today his focus was fractured. They were leaving Friday, 2 nights in Austin, far enough from Dallas that they could breathe. He'd already arranged for Riley to stay with Mrs. Chen, had already lied and said it was a work conference. The guilt sat heavy in his stomach, but not heavy enough to make him cancel. Carter. Scarlett's voice cut through his thoughts. The Q3 projections. Walk us through them. He stood, clicked to his slide deck, and launched into the analysis he could recite in his sleep. Revenue trends, demographic shifts, projected growth in the Southwest market. His voice was steady, professional. No one looking at him would guess that he'd fallen asleep last night thinking about the curve of her neck. The data suggests we should reallocate resources from the Houston office to San Antonio, he concluded. The ROI potential is significantly higher. Interesting. Scarlett leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her. And what about the Austin market? You didn't mention it. Ethan's brain stuttered. Austin. They were going to Austin. The word felt loaded, dangerous. Austin's steady, he said carefully. No significant changes projected for Q3. Really? Because the preliminary data I've seen suggests otherwise. She was testing him. He could see it in the slight arch of her eyebrow, the way her gaze held his for a fraction too long. The rest of the room faded to background noise. You're right, Ethan admitted. Austin shows potential for growth. I should have included it in the analysis. Yes, you should have. The words hung in the air, weighted with double meaning. Marcus shifted in his seat beside him. Jenkins coughed. Send me a revised projection by end of day, Scarlett continued, her tone clipped. Include Austin, and anything else you might have overlooked. Of course. She moved on to the next agenda item, but Ethan felt the moment echo in his chest. It was the first time they'd slipped, not obviously, not enough for anyone to be certain, but enough to plant doubt. He'd said Austin, and something in his voice had betrayed him. Or maybe she'd pushed too hard, her question too pointed. Either way, the careful balance they'd maintained for 3 weeks had just tilted. After the meeting, Ethan packed up his laptop with hands that wanted to shake. Marcus caught his arm in the hallway. That was weird. What was weird? Scarlett, the way she went after you about Austin. She never gets that specific with the data guys. That's what she has Jenkins for. Maybe she's having a bad day. Maybe. Marcus didn't sound convinced. Or maybe there's something going on that I'm not seeing. There's nothing going on. Right. And you're not checking your phone every 5 minutes, and you didn't leave early 3 times last week, and you definitely didn't come back from lunch yesterday with your shirt buttoned wrong. Ethan looked down. His shirt was fine. Marcus grinned. Gotcha. But seriously, man, whatever this is, be careful. Scarlett Vaughn doesn't strike me as someone who forgives mistakes. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who's in way over his head and doesn't want to admit it. Ethan didn't have an answer for that, because Marcus was right. He was in over his head, drowning in something that felt too big and too real and too impossible to sustain. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Yes. My office. Now. He made an excuse to Marcus, something about needing to clarify the Austin data, and took the elevator to the top floor. Scarlett's assistant waved him through without comment, and Ethan stepped into the expansive corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows and view of downtown Dallas. Scarlett was standing by the window, her back to him, shoulders rigid. "Close the door," she said. He did. The click echoed louder than it should have. "That was sloppy," she said, still not turning around. "The way I called you out in there. I shouldn't have done that." "It's fine." "It's not fine. People noticed. Marcus noticed. I could see it on his face. And if he's noticing, others will too." "Scarlett, we need to be more careful." She finally turned, and her expression was fractured with something Ethan couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or frustration. "This whole thing, it's getting harder to hide, and I don't know if I'm good at hiding anymore." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we should cancel Austin. Maybe we should take a step back before this gets out of control." The words hit him like cold water. "You want to end this." "I want to be smart. There's a difference." "No, there isn't. You're scared, so you're running." Her eyes flashed. "Don't tell me what I'm doing. Then tell me yourself. Are you ending this? Right now? Are you walking away?" The silence stretched between them, taut and fragile. Scarlett crossed her arms, a defensive gesture that made her look smaller than she was. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "I don't know what I'm doing. All I know is that every time I see you at work, I have to pretend I don't know how you take your coffee. I have to pretend I didn't fall asleep on the phone with you last Tuesday. I have to pretend you're just another employee when the truth is—" She stopped, took a breath. "When the truth is what?" Ethan asked quietly. "When the truth is, you're the best part of my day, and that terrifies me." Ethan moved closer, careful not to touch her, but close enough to feel the heat of her presence. "It terrifies me too, but I'm not running from it. Maybe you should be. Maybe we both should. Except we're not. We're going to Austin on Friday. We're going to have 2 days where we don't have to hide, and then we'll come back and figure out how to make this work. And if we can't make it work, then at least we tried." Scarlett looked at him for a long moment, her expression shifting through emotions too fast to track. Then she stepped forward, close enough that her forehead almost touched his chest. "I'm not good at this," she whispered. "At letting people in, at trusting that they won't leave. I'm not leaving. Everyone leaves eventually." "Not everyone." Ethan lifted his hand, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was brief, barely there, but it felt monumental. "I'm still here, aren't I?" She pulled back, straightened her shoulders, and the CEO mask slid back into place. "You should go, before someone notices you've been in here too long." "Scarlett, I'll text you the hotel details tonight. Don't cancel your plans with Mrs. Chen." "I won't." "And Ethan?" She moved back to her desk, her movements controlled and precise. "Be more careful in meetings. No more slips. Same to you." A ghost of a smile. "Agreed." He left her office feeling unsteady, like the ground had shifted beneath his feet and he wasn't sure which direction was safe anymore. The rest of the week crawled. Ethan went through the motions. Work, Riley, sleep, repeat, while his phone buzzed with logistics. Hotel confirmation, dinner reservation. A message that just said, "I can't wait," followed immediately by, "That was unprofessional. Disregard." He didn't disregard it. He read it 17 times. On Thursday night, while packing a bag he hoped looked casual enough for a work conference, Riley appeared in his doorway holding her stuffed elephant. "Are you going away?" she asked, her voice small. "Just for the weekend, sweetheart. Mrs. Chen's going to stay with you." "Is it for work?" The lie tasted bitter. "Yes." "You don't look happy about it." "I'm not unhappy, just it's complicated." Riley climbed onto his bed, settling among the shirts he hadn't folded yet. "Is it because of the person who makes you smile funny?" Ethan froze mid-fold. "What?" "The one you text, the one who makes you check your phone all the time." She hugged her elephant tighter. "Are they nice?" He sat down beside her, trying to find words that were honest without being too honest. "Very nice, but it's complicated." "Because of Mommy?" "No. Because of—" He stopped. "How did you explain this to a 5-year-old? Because sometimes grown-ups have to be careful about who knows things. It's not lying exactly. It's just private. Like when I don't tell everyone at school that I still sleep with Elephant? Exactly like that." Riley considered this, her small face serious. "Okay, but you'll come back, right? You won't leave like Mommy did?" The question cracked something open in Ethan's chest. He pulled her close, breathing in the strawberry shampoo smell of her hair. "I will always come back to you. Always. That's a promise I will never break." "Pinky promise?" "Pinky promise." She linked her tiny finger with his, and Ethan felt the weight of that gesture settle in his bones. Whatever happened with Scarlett, whatever fell apart or came together, Riley came first. She always would. Friday morning arrived wrapped in summer heat and nervous energy. Ethan dropped Riley at Mrs. Chen's apartment, endured her knowing smile, and drove to the office to maintain appearances. He'd leave at lunch, officially headed to a conference that didn't exist. The morning dragged. Every minute felt like an hour. Ethan stared at spreadsheets without seeing them, responded to emails without reading them properly. His bag was already in his car. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from Marcus about a client issue that Ethan couldn't bring himself to care about. At 11:30, Scarlett walked past his desk. She didn't look at him, didn't slow down, but she dropped something as she passed, a folded piece of paper that landed beside his keyboard. Ethan waited until she was gone before unfolding it. "Meet me at the Whole Foods on Lover's Lane in 20 minutes. We'll drive together from there. Tell no one." He crumpled the note, shoved it in his pocket, and told Marcus he was feeling sick, left the building, drove across town, and found Scarlett's Mercedes parked in the far corner of the grocery store lot. She was in the driver's seat, sunglasses on, looking like she was about to rob a bank. "Get in," she said when he knocked on the window. "What about my car?" "Leave it. We'll pick it up Sunday night." "Scarlett, do you want to argue or do you want to leave?" He got in. She pulled out of the parking lot with the kind of controlled aggression that suggested she'd been waiting hours instead of minutes. They merged onto the highway, heading south, and neither of them spoke until Dallas was shrinking in the rearview mirror. "This is insane," Ethan said finally. "I know." "If anyone finds out, they won't. I cleared my schedule, told my assistant I was taking a personal day. No one questions me when I do that. Must be nice. It's lonely." She glanced at him, then back at the road. "But less lonely with you here?" The drive to Austin took 3 hours. They talked about everything and nothing, Riley's latest kindergarten drama, Scarlett's frustration with a board member who didn't understand technology, the weird roadside attractions they passed. It felt normal in a way that nothing else in their relationship had felt. Like they were just two people on a road trip, not a billionaire and her employee sneaking away for a secret weekend. The hotel was boutique and expensive, tucked into a quiet neighborhood south of downtown. Scarlett had booked a suite under a name that wasn't hers, paid in cash, and insisted on carrying her own bag. The room was all clean lines and natural light, a king bed dominating the space. Ethan set his bag down and immediately felt out of place. This wasn't his world. The thread count on those sheets probably cost more than his monthly car payment. "Stop thinking so loud," Scarlett said from behind him. "I can hear you catastrophizing from here." "I'm not." "You are. You're thinking about how much this costs, how you don't belong here, how this is all going to fall apart spectacularly." She moved past him, kicked off her shoes, and collapsed onto the bed with a sigh. "And maybe you're right. But can we have one weekend where we don't think about that? Where we just exist?" Ethan looked at her, this brilliant, terrifying woman sprawled across expensive sheets, her guard finally down. And he made a decision. He sat on the edge of the bed. "Okay, what do you want to do?" "Honestly, I want to sleep. I haven't slept properly in weeks." "Then sleep. Will you stay?" "Where else would I go?" She smiled, small and genuine, and shifted to make room for him. Ethan lay down beside her, careful to maintain distance. But Scarlett closed that gap almost immediately. She curled against him, her head on his chest, and within minutes her breathing had evened out into sleep. Ethan stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her trust settle over him like a blanket. This was real. This mattered. And he had no idea how to protect it. He must have dozed off because when he opened his eyes, the room was darker. Scarlett was still asleep, but she'd shifted in her sleep, one arm thrown across his stomach. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a message from Mrs. Chen with a photo of Riley covered in paint from an art project. "Mrs. Chen. She's fine. You two have fun at your conference." The quotation marks felt accusatory. Ethan set his phone down and carefully extracted himself from Scarlett's grip. She stirred, but didn't wake. He stood by the window, looking out at the Austin skyline, and felt the full weight of what he was doing. He was lying to his daughter. Lying to his friend, lying to everyone at work. And for what? For stolen moments with a woman who might decide tomorrow that this was too risky, too complicated, too real. "You're thinking too loud again." Scarlett's voice was rough with sleep. "Come back to bed." "I should check on Riley." "You just checked on Riley. Mrs. Chen sent you a photo." She sat up, pushing hair out of her face. "Talk to me. What's going on in your head?" "All of this, the lying, the sneaking around. I keep wondering when it stops being exciting and starts being exhausting." "And?" "I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow." Scarlett patted the bed beside her. "Come here." He did. She took his hand, laced their fingers together. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "Every day I wake up and think this is the day it all falls apart. The day someone figures it out, or you realize I'm not worth the risk. Or I sabotage it because that's what I do when things get real." "You won't sabotage it." "How do you know?" "Because you're here. Because you cleared your schedule and drove 3 hours to be with someone who can't offer you anything except honesty. That's not sabotage. That's bravery." She laughed, but it sounded sad. "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified." "Good. That means it matters." They ordered room service for dinner. Pasta and wine that Scarlett insisted on paying for. Ate sitting on the bed, trading bites and stories, letting the conversation wander wherever it wanted. Scarlett talked about her parents, about the scholarship that had gotten her into business school, about the first investor who'd believed in her vision. Ethan told her about the novel he'd tried to write in college, about the moment he'd held Riley for the first time, about how some days he still felt like he was pretending to be an adult. "We're all pretending," Scarlett said, refilling their wine glasses. "The secret is that no one actually knows what they're doing. We're just making it up as we go along and hoping no one notices." That's a depressing thought. Or liberating, depends on how you look at it. Later they walked through downtown Austin, blending into the crowd of tourists and locals. No one looked at them twice. No one cared. They were just another couple wandering through the warm night, and the anonymity felt like freedom. They stopped at a bar with live music, sat in the back where the lights were dim and the sound swallowed conversation. Scarlett leaned against him, her hand resting on his knee, and Ethan realized this was what he'd been missing in his careful, controlled life. This feeling of being alive, of taking risks, of letting something matter enough to be scary. "Thank you," Scarlett said during a break between songs. "For what?" "For this. For seeing me. For not running when things got complicated." "They're going to get more complicated." "I know. But maybe that's okay. Maybe complicated is better than empty. They stayed until the bar closed, then walked back to the hotel through streets that smelled like barbecue and summer nights. In the elevator, Scarlett kissed him for the first time, soft and tentative, like she was asking a question. Ethan answered by pulling her closer, and the elevator dinged open on their floor before either of them wanted to let go. Inside the room, things shifted, became urgent and tender and wordless. They undressed each other slowly, learning the geography of skin and breath and trust, and when they finally came together, it felt like crossing a threshold they couldn't uncross. Afterward, lying in the tangled sheets with Scarlett's head on his chest, Ethan felt the magnitude of what had just changed between them. "We can't go back from this," he said quietly. "I know. Are you okay with that?" She tilted her head to look at him. "Are you?" Terrified. But yes, same. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Ethan dreamed of nothing at all. Saturday morning came too early. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and Scarlett was already awake, sitting by the window with coffee she'd ordered from room service. "Morning," Ethan mumbled, his voice rough. "Morning. There's coffee for you, too." He joined her by the window. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Austin wake up below them. "What do you want to do today?" Scarlett asked. "Honestly, I just want to be with you. Everything else is negotiable." They spent the day doing nothing remarkable. Wandered through a farmer's market, bought things they didn't need, had lunch at a food truck, sitting on a curb like college kids, visited a bookstore where Scarlett bought 3 novels she'd never have time to read, and Ethan found a children's book for Riley that he'd have to hide until he figured out how to explain where it came from. It was normal and perfect and fleeting, and Ethan tried to memorize every moment, knowing that by Monday they'd be back to stolen glances and coded messages. That night over dinner at a restaurant, Scarlett swore wasn't on any Dallas social scene's radar. She asked the question he'd been dreading. "What happens when we go back?" "We keep being careful." "For how long? Weeks? Months? Forever?" Ethan set down his fork. "I don't know. What do you want to happen?" "I want to not have to hide. I want to be able to acknowledge that you exist in my life as more than an employee. But I also want to protect what I've built, and I don't know how to do both. So we keep hiding until we figure it out. And if we never figure it out," the question hung between them, unanswerable. Because the truth was, there might not be a solution. Their worlds were too different, the stakes too high, the risks too real. "Then we deal with that when it happens," Ethan said finally. "But right now, we have tonight. Can that be enough?" Scarlett reached across the table, took his hand. "It has to be." They went back to the hotel, made love with the desperation of people who knew their time was running out, and fell asleep holding on to each other like anchors in a storm. Sunday morning, they drove back to Dallas in silence. The easy conversation from the drive down had evaporated, replaced by the weight of reality closing back in. They were an hour outside the city when Scarlett's phone rang. She answered on speaker. "Yes?" "Ms. Vaughn, I'm so sorry to bother you on your day off." Her assistant's voice was apologetic but urgent. "But there's a situation with the Henderson account. The client is threatening to pull out." "What happened?" "Jenkins tried to renegotiate terms without your approval. They're furious." Scarlett's jaw tightened. "Set up a call for tomorrow morning, first thing, and tell Jenkins he and I need to have a conversation." "Of course. Again, I'm sorry to interrupt your weekend." "It's fine. Thank you for letting me know." She hung up, and Ethan could see the transformation happening in real time. The relaxed woman from the weekend was disappearing, replaced by the CEO who couldn't afford mistakes. "You okay?" he asked. "I will be. Once I fire Jenkins." "You're firing him?" "He went over my head, made decisions that weren't his to make. I can't let that slide." "Scarlett, don't!" Her voice was sharp. "Don't tell me to be merciful. This is business." He knew the rules. They didn't speak for the rest of the drive. When they reached the Whole Foods where Ethan's car was still parked, Scarlett pulled into the spot beside it. "Thank you," she said, not looking at him. "For this weekend, for everything." It doesn't have to end here. I know, but it feels like it is, doesn't it? Ethan didn't have an answer for that, because she was right. Something had shifted. The real world was pressing in, demanding they choose between the life they wanted and the lives they'd built. He leaned over, kissed her once, and got out of the car before he could say something he'd regret. Driving home, his phone buzzed with a message. S. I meant what I said. Thank you. Ethan. Same. We'll figure this out. Will we? He stared at that question for 3 traffic lights before typing back. We have to. But even as he sent it, he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. Monday morning felt like walking into a different building. Ethan sat at his desk with coffee he couldn't taste, staring at a screen full of numbers that refused to make sense. His body was still in Austin, still wrapped in hotel sheets, still feeling the weight of Scarlett's head on his chest. But his mind was here, in this fluorescent hell, trying to remember how to pretend. Marcus dropped into the chair beside him. You look like death. Didn't sleep well. How was the conference? Ethan's brain lagged for a second before remembering the lie. Boring. Lots of PowerPoints about data optimization. Sounds awful. Did you learn anything useful? Not really. Marcus squinted at him. You're acting weird again, weirder than usual. I'm tired, that's all. Right. Marcus didn't look convinced, but he let it drop. Well, heads up. Scarlett's on the warpath. She fired Jenkins this morning, called him into her office at 8:30, and he was cleaning out his desk by 9. Ethan's stomach dropped. She fired him? Apparently he screwed up the Henderson account, tried to play big shot, and it backfired. Marcus lowered his voice. Word is she didn't even raise her voice, just told him to pack his things and left the room, cold as hell. That's... Ethan stopped, unsure what he wanted to say. That's not who she is. Except it was. This was the Scarlett everyone saw. Ruthless, unforgiving, willing to cut losses without hesitation. The woman who'd fallen asleep in his arms felt like someone he'd imagined. Through the glass walls of her office, he could see her on a call, her posture rigid with controlled fury. She was fighting to save the Henderson account, to fix the mess Jenkins had made. And she'd do it because failure wasn't in her vocabulary. His phone buzzed. S. Don't look at me like that. Ethan. Like what? Like you're disappointed. I did what I had to do. Ethan. I know. S. Do you? He didn't answer, because the truth was more complicated than yes or no. He understood why she'd fired Jenkins. Understood that in her world, trust was currency and betrayal was unforgivable. But understanding didn't make it easier to watch her be the person everyone feared. The day ground forward, Ethan buried himself in work, hoping productivity would quiet the noise in his head. It didn't. Every time someone walked past his desk, he tensed. Every phone notification made his pulse spike. He was waiting for something to break, for someone to figure it out, for the fragile house of cards they'd built to collapse. At lunch, he hid in his car and called Mrs. Chen. How's Riley? Perfect. We made cookies this morning. She ate most of the dough. Of course she did. How was your conference? The question sounded innocent, but Mrs. Chen had a way of making innocent questions feel loaded. It was fine. Just fine? You were gone an entire weekend. It was work, Mrs. Chen. Work isn't supposed to be exciting. That single syllable contained volumes of skepticism. Riley asked when you'd be home again. She missed you. The guilt hit fresh and sharp. I missed her too. Then maybe next time, bring her along. Or skip the conference altogether. She's only young once, Ethan. These years go fast. I know. Do you? Because lately you seem distracted, like your mind is somewhere else. There's a lot going on at work. Work. She said it like she didn't believe him. Well, don't let work make you forget what matters. After they hung up, Ethan sat in his car, staring at nothing. Mrs. Chen was right. He was forgetting, or at least letting his priorities blur in ways that scared him. Riley should come first, always. But somewhere between stolen moments and secret texts, he'd started organizing his life around Scarlett instead of his daughter. He needed to fix that, Needed to find balance before he lost both. That night, after Riley was in bed, his phone rang. Not a text, an actual call. Scarlett never called. "Hello? Can you talk?" Her voice sounded strained. "Yeah, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." He heard her take a breath. "I keep thinking about what you said, about Jenkins, about me being ruthless." "I didn't say that. You thought it. I could see it on your face." Ethan moved to the kitchen, away from Riley's room. "You did what you had to do. I get that. But you don't like it. I don't have to like it. It's not my company." That's not an answer. He leaned against the counter, trying to find honest words that wouldn't make things worse. "I think you're scared of being vulnerable. So you control everything you can, and you cut loose anything that threatens that control. And maybe that works in business. But in a relationship, we're not in a relationship." She interrupted. We can't be. Not really. Not when everything has to stay hidden." "Then what are we doing?" Silence. Long enough that Ethan thought she might have hung up. Then, "I don't know. I thought I did. But after this weekend, after letting myself have something real, coming back to this feels impossible. So don't come back to it. Change it." "How?" "Tell me how I'm supposed to walk into that office and announce that I'm involved with an employee. Tell me how that doesn't destroy everything I've built. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not about easy, Ethan. It's about impossible. There's no version of this where we both get what we want. Either I lose my credibility, or we keep hiding. Those are the options. Or we find a third option." "Like what?" He didn't have an answer. The silence stretched again, heavy with things they couldn't say. "I should go," Scarlett said finally. I needed to hear your voice, to remember that this weekend actually happened. It happened. Did it? Because right now it feels like a dream I had. Something I made up to feel less alone." "You're not alone, aren't I?" Her laugh was bitter. "I'm standing in a penthouse that costs $3 million, surrounded by things I bought because I could, and I've never felt more isolated in my life. At least before I met you, I didn't know what I was missing." "Scarlett, I have to go. I'll text you tomorrow." She hung up before he could respond. Ethan stood in his kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, listening to dead air and wondering how something that had felt so right 2 days ago could feel so broken now. The next 2 weeks were a special kind of torture. They saw each other every day, but couldn't acknowledge it. Passed in hallways like strangers. Sat in meetings where Scarlett's voice cut through discussions with surgical precision, and Ethan had to pretend he didn't know what that voice sounded like, whispering his name in the dark. Their texts became shorter, more careful, logistics and surface-level check-ins instead of real conversation. The intimacy they'd built in Austin was evaporating under the weight of secrecy and distance. On a Thursday afternoon, everything changed. Ethan was in a meeting, one of those endless sessions about market strategy that could have been an email. Scarlett was at the head of the table, fielding questions about expansion into new territories. Marcus sat beside Ethan, taking notes that were probably just doodles. "The Phoenix market looks promising," someone from sales said. "But we'd need boots on the ground, someone who understands the demographic." "Carter could do it," Jenkins' replacement, a woman named Torres, suggested. "He did the analysis. He knows the market better than anyone." Ethan's attention snapped back to the room. "I'm sorry, what?" "Phoenix, we're talking about opening a satellite office, and you're the obvious choice to head it up, at least in the initial phase." "For how long?" 6 months, maybe a year. Depends on how quickly we can establish a foothold." Ethan's brain stalled. "Phoenix, a year. Away from Dallas, away from Riley, away from..." His gaze flickered to Scarlett without meaning to. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "I'd have to think about it," Ethan said carefully. "I have my daughter to consider. I can't just uproot her life." "Bring her with you," Torres said, like it was simple. The company would cover relocation costs, and it'd be a significant step up in responsibility. Looks good for future advancement. "I appreciate the opportunity, but take the weekend to think about it," Scarlett cut in, her voice crisp and professional. "This isn't a decision that needs to be made today. Carter, We can discuss the details in my office after this meeting. The rest of the meeting blurred. Ethan nodded in the right places, contributed nothing, and counted the minutes until he could leave. When it finally ended, he followed Scarlett to her office on shaking legs. She closed the door, didn't sit. "Phoenix," Ethan said flatly, "it's a good opportunity." "For who?" "For you, for your career, for Riley. You'd make more money, have better benefits." "And for us?" Scarlett turned away, moved to the window. The view of Dallas spread out behind her like a kingdom she ruled. "There is no us. Not in any way that matters." "That's not true." "Isn't it? We've been hiding for over a month, Ethan, sneaking around, lying to everyone. And for what? So we can have conversations in parking lots and secret weekends that leave us both feeling worse than before? So this is you ending it. You're sending me to Phoenix to make it easier. I'm giving you a chance to build something real, a career, a future for your daughter, things you can actually hold on to. I want to hold on to you." She spun around, and her expression was fractured with pain. "You can't. Don't you see that? Even if we went public tomorrow, even if I stood in front of the entire company and told them about us, what then? You'd always be the guy who slept his way to advancement. I'd always be the CEO who couldn't keep her personal life separate from business. We'd destroy each other. So we just give up? We stop pretending this can work." Ethan felt something crack inside him. "When did you decide this? Was it before or after you called me 2 weeks ago saying you'd never felt more alone? That's not fair." "None of this is fair, but I'm tired of you making unilateral decisions about our relationship and calling it pragmatism." "What do you want me to do?" Her voice rose, the control slipping. "Tell me. What's the solution? Because I've thought about this from every angle, and I can't find one that doesn't end with both of us losing everything that matters. Maybe I'm what matters. And maybe that's not enough." The words came out quiet, devastating. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I am. But I built this company from nothing. I sacrificed everything for it. And I won't let it fall apart because I fell for someone I shouldn't have." The phrase landed like a punch. Fell for someone. Past tense, like it was already over. "So that's it," Ethan said. "Phoenix or nothing. I'm not forcing you to take it." "Aren't you? What happens if I stay? We go back to pretending, to stolen moments that make us both miserable?" Scarlett didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. Ethan headed for the door, then stopped with his hand on the handle. "For what it's worth, I don't regret Austin. I don't regret any of it. I just wish you were brave enough to fight for this instead of running the second it got hard. That's not what I'm doing, isn't it?" He opened the door. "Let me know if you figure out the difference." He walked out before she could respond, past her assistant's curious glance, into the elevator that felt like a descent into hell. His phone buzzed before he reached the ground floor. "I'm sorry." He deleted the message without responding. That night, Riley asked him what was wrong. "Nothing, sweetheart, just a long day at work." "You're sad." "I'm tired." It's the same face. She was too perceptive for 5 years old. Ethan pulled her onto his lap, buried his face in her hair. "What would you think about moving?" he asked. "To a different city, somewhere new." "Ooh, would Mrs. Chen come?" "No, but we'd make new friends." Riley was quiet, thinking it over with the seriousness she brought to big decisions. "Would you be less sad there?" "I don't know." "Then maybe we should stay here, where you have people who make you smile. The person who makes me smile is the reason I'm sad. Then they're not a very good person." Out of the mouths of kindergartners. Ethan hugged her tighter. "You're right. You're absolutely right." He spent the weekend wrestling with the decision. Phoenix made sense on paper. More money, better title, a clean break from the situation that was eating him alive. But it also meant admitting defeat, letting Scarlett push him away because she was too scared to try. On Monday morning, he walked into her office without an appointment. "I'm not taking Phoenix," he said. Scarlett looked up from her computer. "Ethan, I'm not taking it, and I'm not quitting, which means we have to figure out how to work together without destroying each other." "I already told you that's not possible." Then we make it possible. We set boundaries, we're professional at work. We don't let this bleed into business decisions. And outside of work, there can't be an outside of work. Why not? Because you're scared? Because it's complicated? Everything worth having is complicated, Scarlett, but you'd rather burn it down than risk failing at it. That's not true. Then prove it. Have dinner with me. Tonight. Somewhere public. Not hidden, not secret. Just two people having dinner. That's insane. So was asking you out in the first place, but I did it anyway. Ethan moved closer, close enough to see the war happening behind her eyes. You told me once that you wanted to know what it felt like to be seen as a person instead of a position. I see you, Scarlett. All of you. The brilliant parts and the scared parts and everything in between. And I'm not walking away just because it's hard. What if I ask you to? Then I'll respect that. But you have to actually ask, not make decisions for me and call it protection. Scarlett's hands were shaking. She clasped them together on her desk, and Ethan saw the effort it took to hold herself together. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. How to want something this much and not ruin it. Then let's figure it out together. But we have to actually try. Not hide, not run. Try. She closed her eyes. Okay. Okay? Dinner, tonight, but somewhere quiet. I'm not ready for public yet. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Ethan nodded. Text me the place. He left before either of them could change their minds. They met at a small Italian restaurant in a neighborhood neither of them had been to before. Scarlett arrived first, already seated in a corner booth that gave them privacy without feeling like they were hiding. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a sweater, and Ethan realized he'd never seen her in jeans before. You look different, he said, sliding into the booth across from her. Different good or different bad? Different human. She almost smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. The waiter brought menus, took their drink orders, and left them to an awkward silence that felt nothing like Austin. This was harder, being together in the same city, with all their problems still unresolved. But at least they were here. At least they were trying. I'm sorry, Scarlett said. For Phoenix. For trying to make that decision for you. I'm sorry for what I said, about you not being brave. That wasn't fair. It was accurate, though. I am scared. Terrified, actually. Because everyone I've ever cared about has left. My parents died. The few relationships I've had fell apart because I couldn't make room for them. And you... She stopped, swallowed hard. You make me want to make room, and that's more frightening than anything I've faced in business. Why is it frightening? Because if I let you in and you leave anyway, I don't know how I come back from that. Ethan reached across the table, took her hand. I'm not leaving. I mean it. I know you've been hurt. I know you've learned not to trust people, but I'm still here. I'm still choosing this. Even when it's hard, even when you're pushing me away, I'm still here. Tears welled in her eyes, the first time he'd seen her cry. She brushed them away impatiently. I hate crying. It's weak. It's human. Same thing. No, it's not. They ordered food they barely touched, talked in circles around the real issue, until finally Scarlett said what they'd both been avoiding. I don't know how we make this work. Practically. We can't hide forever. But if we go public, then we deal with the consequences, together. It could cost you your job. Then I'll find another one. Ethan, I mean it. I'm not staying at Vaughn Industries if it means losing you. There are other jobs, but there's only one you. She looked at him like he'd said something in a language she didn't speak. How can you be so certain? Because I've already lost someone I thought I'd spend my life with. I know what that feels like. And this, us, doesn't feel like that. It feels like the thing I'm supposed to fight for. What if I'm not worth fighting for? Then I'll have been wrong, but I don't think I am. Scarlett was quiet for a long time. Then she squeezed his hand. Okay, we'll try, really try. But we have to be smart about it. We can't just announce it tomorrow. We need a plan. What kind of plan? Give me 2 weeks. Let me talk to HR, figure out the disclosure requirements, see what policies we'd be violating. Then we'll decide how to move forward. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And in the meantime, we're careful at work. But outside of work, she smiled, small and genuine. Outside of work, we stop hiding. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And right now, honest felt like more than Ethan had hoped for. They left the restaurant together, walking to their cars parked side by side. At her door, Scarlett turned to face him. "Thank you," she said, "for not giving up on me. Thank you for letting me try." She kissed him then, brief and soft and full of promise. Then she got in her car and drove away, and Ethan stood in the parking lot feeling like maybe, possibly, they just found a way forward. The next 2 weeks were different, better. They still maintained distance at work, but the weight of secrecy had shifted. They were working toward something instead of hiding from it. Scarlett met with HR, reviewed company policies, consulted with her lawyer. Ethan focused on being present for Riley, on remembering that whatever happened with Scarlett, his daughter came first. And outside of work, they stole moments, coffee before the office opened, late-night phone calls after Riley was asleep, a Saturday afternoon at the park where they sat on a bench and watched kids play and talked about futures that might actually include each other. It felt fragile, but it felt real. Then on a Wednesday morning, everything fell apart. Ethan was at his desk when Marcus appeared, his face pale. "We need to talk. Now. Not here." They went to the parking garage, down to the lower level where no one parked. Marcus turned on him with an expression Ethan had never seen before. "Are you sleeping with Scarlett Vaughn?" The question hit like a physical blow. "What?" "Don't lie to me. I've been your friend for 3 years. I know when you're lying. Marcus, someone saw you last week at that Italian place in Bishop Arts. They saw you holding hands, saw her kiss you, and now it's all over the office. People are talking. Torres is talking about reporting it to HR. This is bad, Ethan. This is really, really bad." Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. "Who saw us? Does it matter? The secret's out. And unless you have a really good explanation, you're about to lose everything." Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands, already knowing what he'd see. "My office. Now." Marcus was still talking, something about damage control and plausible deniability, but Ethan couldn't hear him over the ringing in his ears. This was it, the moment they'd both been dreading, the collapse they'd tried so hard to prevent. "I have to go," Ethan said. "Go where?" "Ethan, you need to think about this." "I know, I will. Just give me an hour." He took the elevator up, his reflection in the polished doors looking like a stranger, pale, hollowed out, bracing for impact. When the doors opened on Scarlett's floor, her assistant didn't meet his eyes. "She's waiting for you." Scarlett was standing by the window when he entered, her posture rigid. She didn't turn around when the door closed. "Torres came to see me this morning, she said, her voice flat, with concerns about workplace conduct, specifically concerns about inappropriate relationships between management and staff." "Scarlett, she didn't name you directly, but she made it clear that rumors are circulating, that people saw us together, that if I don't address it, she'll file a formal complaint with the board." Ethan moved closer, careful not to touch her. "What do you want to do?" "What I want doesn't matter anymore. This is about damage control now." She finally turned, and her face was a mask, the CEO armor back in place, every vulnerability locked away. "I've already drafted your resignation letter, 2 weeks' notice, generous severance package, a reference that will help you land somewhere else quickly." The words took a moment to penetrate. "You're firing me." "I'm protecting us both. If you resign now, before this becomes an official investigation, we can control the narrative. You wanted to pursue other opportunities. I accepted your resignation with regret. Clean break." "That's not a clean break. That's you cutting me loose to save yourself." "To save us both," she corrected, and there was an edge of desperation in it. "If this goes to the board, they'll dig into everything, every meeting, every moment, every decision I've made involving you. They'll find Austin. They'll find the dinners, the texts, all of it. And then it won't just be your job on the line. It'll be my entire company, everything I've built. So I'm the sacrifice. You're the solution to a problem we both created. Ethan laughed, bitter and sharp. We. Right. Except I'm the one losing my job while you get to stay here and keep your empire. What did you expect? Her composure cracked just slightly. You knew what this was from the beginning. I told you the rules. I told you what would happen if anyone found out. And I told you I was willing to fight for this. But apparently that only works when it's convenient for you. That's not fair. None of this is fair. His voice rose, bouncing off the glass and steel. You want to know what's not fair? I fell in love with you. Actually fell in love. Not with your money or your company or your power. With you. The person who falls asleep mid-sentence when she's exhausted. Who gets excited about terrible art. Who's terrified of being vulnerable but does it anyway. That's who I fell for. And now you're standing here telling me that person doesn't matter as much as protecting your reputation. Scarlett's face went white. Don't. Don't what? Tell the truth? That's all I've ever done with you. Stop. Her hands were shaking. You can't say that. Why not? Because it makes it real? Because it means you're not just losing an employee, you're losing someone who actually sees you? Because it makes it hurt. The words tore out of her, raw and unguarded. Because if you love me, then I'm not just protecting my company. I'm destroying the one real thing I've had in years. And I can't carry that and run this place. I can't be broken and in charge. One or the other, Ethan, not both. The silence that followed was enormous. Ethan could hear the city through the windows, traffic and construction, and life continuing like their world wasn't falling apart. So choose, he said quietly. What? Choose, the company or this, your empire or us. You can't have both? Fine, then choose. That's not a real choice. It's the only one that matters. Scarlett turned back to the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I've spent 10 years building Vaughn Industries. 10 years of 90-hour weeks and missed birthdays and sacrificing everything that makes life worth living. I've done it because I had to. Because after my parents died, I had nothing else. This company is my family, my legacy, the proof that I mattered. But she paused. And then you walked into my office and asked me to dinner, and for the first time in a decade, I wanted something more than success. I wanted to matter to someone, not just something. You do matter, to me, to Riley, even though she doesn't know it yet. You matter, but not enough to make this easy. Nothing worth having is easy. You taught me that. She laughed, sad and exhausted. I don't remember saying that. You didn't, but you showed me. Every day, watching you fight for what you believe in, you showed me that easy isn't the goal. Real is the goal. And this is real, Scarlett. What we have is real. Then why does it feel like it's killing me? Ethan moved to stand beside her at the window. Below, Dallas sprawled in every direction, buildings and highways and millions of people living their small, complicated lives. Somewhere down there, Riley was at kindergarten, learning about shapes or colors, unaware that her father's world was imploding. What if we just told the truth? He said. What? What if we walked out there right now and told everyone? No spin, no narrative control, just, yes, we're together. Yes, we know it's complicated. Yes, we're figuring it out. That's career suicide for both of us. Maybe, or maybe people respect honesty more than we think they do. Scarlett shook her head. You don't understand how this works. The board doesn't care about honesty. They care about liability. And a CEO dating an employee is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Then I'll quit. For real this time. Not because you're forcing me, but because I choose to. I'll find another job, we'll date openly, and there's no scandal. And you'll resent me for it, for making you give up your career. It's a job, Scarlett. Not a career, not a calling. It's a job that pays the bills and gives me health insurance. But you, he turned to face her fully, you're the thing I wake up thinking about. The person I want to tell when something funny happens. The future I actually want to build. So yeah, I'll quit today, if that's what it takes. She was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face. I don't know how to let you do that. Then let me decide. Stop trying to control everything and just let me love you. Let me make this choice. What about Riley? What about her? She should come first. Your daughter should always come first. She does. But loving you doesn't mean loving her less. It means showing her that it's okay to want things, to fight for them, to believe that risk is worth it. Ethan reached out, gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. I want her to grow up knowing that love doesn't make you weak. It makes you braver than you thought you could be. Scarlett caught his hand, held it against her face. What if I'm not brave enough? Then I'll be brave enough for both of us, until you catch up. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch like she was drowning and he was air. This is insane. Completely. We could lose everything. Or gain everything that matters. She opened her eyes, and for the first time since he'd walked in, he saw hope there. Terrified and fragile, but real. Okay, she whispered. Okay? I choose you. I choose this, even if it costs me everything else. Ethan pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. She smelled like expensive perfume and fear and possibility. It won't cost you everything. We'll figure it out. How can you be sure? I can't, but I'm willing to find out. They stood like that for a long time, holding on to each other while the city hummed below. Eventually, Scarlett pulled back, her CEO composure reassembling itself piece by piece. I need to talk to the board, officially disclose the relationship, explain that you're resigning to eliminate any conflict of interest. It's going to be messy. Let it be messy. They might force me out. Then you'll build something new, something better. She almost smiled. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's just the right thing to do. Since when do you know what the right thing is? Since I met you. You taught me that too. This time she did smile, small and genuine. I'm going to call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. Until then, we're honest with everyone. Ethan, I mean it. No more hiding. I'm going to tell Marcus. You're going to tell your assistant. And tomorrow, we face whatever comes together. Scarlett took a shaky breath, then nodded. Together. He kissed her once, soft and deliberate, then left her office before either of them could lose their nerve. Marcus was waiting by Ethan's desk, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the last hour. Well, I quit. What? Effective immediately. I'm resigning. And yes, before you ask, Scarlett and I are together. Have been for 2 months. It's real, it's serious, and I'm not apologizing for it. Marcus stared at him. You've lost your mind. Probably, but I've never been more sure of anything. What about Riley? What about your bills? You can't just quit without a plan. I have a plan. Step 1, be honest. Step 2, find a new job. Step 3, figure out the rest as I go. That's a terrible plan. It's the only one I've got. Marcus shook his head, but he was almost smiling. You know what? Good for you. Seriously, I've watched you play it safe for 3 years. It's about time you did something reckless. Thanks, I think. So what now? Now I pack up my desk and go home to my daughter. And tomorrow, Scarlett faces the board. And after that? Ethan looked around the office, at the fluorescent lights and beige cubicles and the small, safe life he'd built here. Then he thought about Scarlett, about Austin, about the feeling of being fully alive for the first time in years. After that, we find out if love is actually worth fighting for, or if we've both just made the biggest mistake of our lives. My money's on the first one. Yeah? Yeah, you've got that look, like you'd walk through fire for her. I would. Then she's lucky. Don't let her forget it. Ethan spent the evening with Riley, present in a way he hadn't been for weeks. They made dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets for dinner, built a blanket fort in the living room, and read books until she fell asleep in his lap. Mrs. Chen came by around 9 to drop off mail she'd collected. You look different, she observed. Different how? Lighter. Like you made a decision and you're at peace with it. I quit my job today. She didn't look surprised. Good. Good? That place was making you small. You're better than small. I have bills, Mrs. Chen. I have Riley. I can't just... You can, and you will, because that's what people who love well do. They take risks. She patted his hand. I'll watch Riley anytime you need. No charge. You focus on building whatever comes next. After she left, Ethan sat in the quiet of his apartment and let himself feel everything. The fear of unemployment, the exhilaration of choosing love, the terror of not knowing what came next. It all swirled together into something that felt strangely like freedom. His phone buzzed. Son, board meeting is at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'm terrified. Ethan. Me too, but we've got this. S. Do we? Ethan. We do, I promise. S. Don't make promises you can't keep. Ethan. Then I'll make sure I can keep it. The next morning, Ethan dropped Riley at school and drove to a coffee shop across from Vaughn Industries. He couldn't be in the building, but he wanted to be close, wanted to be there when Scarlett walked out, whatever the outcome. At 9:15, his phone rang. How's it going? He asked. Badly. Scarlett's voice was tight. They're discussing my removal as CEO. Conflict of interest, failure to disclose, breach of fiduciary duty. The whole list. Can they do that? They can try. I own 42% of the company. They'd need a majority vote to force me out, and I've got allies on the board. But it's going to be close. What can I do? Nothing. Just be there when this is over, whatever happens. I will. I promise. The call ended. Ethan sat in the coffee shop, drinking espresso he couldn't taste, watching the building across the street, and waiting. At 11:30, his phone rang again. Well, he said without preamble. I'm still CEO. Scarlett sounded exhausted but relieved. Barely. They voted 5-4 to keep me on, with conditions. I have to hire an external ethics consultant, submit to quarterly reviews, and publicly disclose our relationship in a company-wide memo. That's good, right? It's better than being fired, but it's going to be ugly. People are going to talk. They're going to question every decision I've made, every promotion, every project you've been involved in. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You don't have to face them every day. No, but I have to face the consequences of my choices. And so do you. That's what being brave looks like. She was quiet for a moment. Where are you? Coffee shop across the street. Come up, please. I need to see you. Scarlett, I don't care who sees anymore. Come up. He paid for his coffee and crossed the street. The lobby felt different, like he was walking into hostile territory instead of a workplace. He took the elevator to Scarlett's floor, where her assistant gave him a look that could have stripped paint. Scarlett was at her desk, looking wrung out and fragile. But when she saw him, something in her expression softened. Hi, she said. Hi. We did it. We're still standing. Barely. That counts. She came around the desk, and to hell with who was watching, she wrapped her arms around him and held on tight. Thank you. For not running when it got hard. Thank you for choosing me. They stood like that until her phone rang with another crisis, another fire to put out. But for that moment, they had each other. And it was enough. The next few weeks were brutal. Scarlett sent the disclosure memo. And the office erupted into gossip and speculation. Some people were supportive, most were judgmental. Torres filed a formal complaint that went nowhere but made everyone's life difficult for 2 weeks. And through it all, Scarlett showed up every day and did her job with the same ruthless competence that had built her empire. Ethan, meanwhile, was job hunting. He sent out resumes, went on interviews, and slowly started to build something new. It wasn't glamorous, a data analyst position at a smaller firm, less pay, but better hours. The kind of job that let him pick Riley up from school every day and still have energy left for the people who mattered. 3 months after everything fell apart, Scarlett showed up at his apartment on a Saturday morning. I have something to tell you, she said. Ethan's stomach dropped. That sounds ominous. It's not. Or maybe it is. I don't know yet. She looked nervous, which was unsettling. Scarlett didn't do nervous. I got an offer from a venture capital firm in New York. They want me to head up their tech investment division. It's huge, the kind of opportunity that doesn't come twice. New York. Yes, that's amazing. Scarlett, you should take it. She blinked. What? You should take it. It's what you've been working toward your whole life, a chance to build something even bigger. But it means leaving Dallas, leaving you. So we figure it out, long distance, or I come with you. Riley's young enough that moving wouldn't be traumatic. And New York has schools, jobs. We could make it work. You do that? Uproot your entire life for me? I do that for us, for the life we're building together. Ethan took her hands, but only if it's what you want, not what you think you should do, not what's expected, what you actually want. Scarlett's eyes were bright with tears. I want you to be proud of me. I am proud of you every day, whether you're running a $300 million company or starting over in a new city. That doesn't change. What if I fail? Then you fail, and you get back up and try again. That's what you do. She pulled him close, and he felt her shoulders shake with silent sobs. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do. You deserve someone who sees your worth even when you can't. They stayed like that for a long time. When she finally pulled back, her decision was written on her face. I'm going to take it, she said, but on one condition. What's that? You and Riley come with me. Not right away. I know you need time to finish out your notice, and she needs to finish the school year. But eventually, we do this together. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. I spent 10 years building a company alone. I don't want to build the next chapter alone, too. Ethan kissed her, tasting salt and possibility. Okay, together. The next 6 months were chaos. Scarlett transitioned out of Vaughn Industries, selling her shares and setting up her successor. Ethan gave notice at his new job, helped Riley prepare for the move, and coordinated with Mrs. Chen about visiting schedules. It was messy and stressful and full of moments where they both questioned whether they were making the right choice. But it was also full of life. Of building something neither of them had thought possible. Of learning that love wasn't about perfect circumstances. It was about choosing each other even when circumstances were terrible. On their last night in Dallas, they took Riley to the park. She ran ahead, chasing butterflies with the fearlessness of children who haven't learned to be afraid of change. You think she'll be okay? Scarlett asked. She'll be better than okay. Kids are resilient. And you? Will you be okay? Ethan watched his daughter, thought about all the ways his life had changed since that reckless moment in Scarlett's office. He'd lost a job, gained love, learned that safety and happiness weren't the same thing. I think I will be, he said. I think we all will be. Scarlett leaned her head on his shoulder. I love you. I don't think I've said that out loud yet. You haven't, but I knew. How? Because you're here. Because you chose me. Because you're willing to risk everything you built for something that might not work out. It's going to work out. Yeah? Yeah. Because we're not doing this alone anymore. We're doing it together, and that makes all the difference. Riley ran back to them, breathless and grinning. Dad, Scarlett, come see. There's a caterpillar. They followed her to where she'd found a fuzzy creature inching along a leaf. Scarlett crouched down beside Riley, listening with genuine interest as his daughter explained the life cycle of butterflies with the confidence of someone who'd learned it yesterday. Ethan watched them together, his daughter and the woman he loved, and felt something settle in his chest. This was what mattered, not the job or the money or the reputation. This, connection, love, the willingness to be vulnerable enough to build something real. 3 weeks later, they stood in a New York apartment with boxes piled to the ceiling and Riley already claiming the bedroom with the best light. Scarlett looked overwhelmed, and Ethan took her hand. We've got this, he said. Do we? We do, one day at a time, one choice at a time, together. She smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way it never had back in Dallas. Together. They unpacked boxes and built furniture and ordered too much takeout. Riley made friends with a girl down the hall. Scarlett started her new position and came home exhausted but energized in a way Ethan had never seen. And Ethan found work that actually interested him, consulting for nonprofits, using his data skills for organizations that mattered. It wasn't perfect. They fought about logistics and schedules and whose turn it was to do dishes. Riley missed misses. Shannon struggled with a new school. Scarlett's job demanded long hours, and sometimes Ethan felt like he was single-parenting all over again. But it was real, it was honest, and it was theirs. 6 months after the move, Ethan woke up to find Scarlett already awake, watching him in the pre-dawn light. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different everything is. How a year ago I would have called this impossible, and now it's just life. Our life. Good different or bad different? The best different." She traced his jawline with gentle fingers. "I spent so long thinking that vulnerability was weakness, that needing someone meant I'd failed at being strong. But you taught me that it's the opposite, that loving you, needing you, that's the bravest thing I've ever done." Same. I thought playing it safe was protecting Riley, but really, I was just teaching her to be afraid. Now, he thought about his daughter in the next room, adapting to change with the resilience he wished he'd had at 32. Now I'm teaching her that risk is worth it, that love is worth fighting for, that you build the life you want by making hard choices and living with the consequences. Even when the consequences are terrifying, especially then. Scarlett kissed him, slow and deep, and Ethan felt the truth of what they'd built settle into his bones. This wasn't a fairy tale. There was no happily ever after, because life kept happening, but there was this, a choice they made every day to keep choosing each other, to keep building something real in a world that tried to make everything simple. Later, over breakfast with Riley chattering about her upcoming field trip, Ethan caught Scarlett's eye across the table. She smiled at him, and he saw it. The woman who'd been too scared to be seen, now letting herself be fully present, messy and human and real. And he thought about that first day, standing outside her office, terrified and reckless and willing to risk everything for a chance at something more. He thought about Austin, about fights and reconciliations, about the moment everything had fallen apart and the moment they'd chosen to rebuild. It hadn't been easy. It had been the hardest thing either of them had ever done, but it had been worth it. Every terrifying, complicated, imperfect moment had been worth it. Because love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone worth fighting for. Someone who made you braver than you thought you could be. Someone who saw you, really saw you, and chose you anyway. Riley looked up from her cereal. "Dad, why are you smiling like that?" "Like what?" "Like you did when we got extra sprinkles that one time." Scarlett laughed, and the sound filled their small kitchen with warmth. "Because I'm happy," Ethan said simply. "Because we're all here together, and that's enough." Riley considered this with the seriousness she brought to important questions. "Okay, can I have more orange juice?" "Sure, sweetheart." Life continued, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. And as Ethan poured juice and Scarlett checked her work email and Riley planned her afternoon with the precision of a tiny general, he realized something fundamental. They hadn't found a perfect ending. They'd found something better, a beginning that promised nothing except the chance to keep trying, to keep choosing each other, to keep building a life that was messy and real and wholly, completely theirs. And in a world that demanded certainty and perfect answers, that was more than enough. It was everything.